Hello, everyone. Good evening, good day, wherever you are, and welcome to this session. My name is Professor Puleng Sakalo, and I'm going to be hanging out with you today. So we're going to hang out and have an opportunity and a platform for you to ask any questions that you might be having concerning the research journey that you are busy embarking on. So either things related to your proposal or things related to your thesis or dissertation, any questions that you might have related to literature or the writing of the different chapters, your data analysis, any issues or points that you might be stuck with, or any issues or any aspects of your work that you're working on that maybe you might want to have a conversation about or have specific questions on. So today's session is for you, right? For us to give attention to the questions that you might be having. I hope that you've come with some questions, and I will do my best to respond to the questions that you have. And of course, if there are any questions that you might have that I don't have the answers readily available for you now, I'll note those questions. And then in the next session that we're going to have, I will consult and check, and I'll come back with the answers for you. Okay, so I'm just going to pause here for a moment and just give you some time to think about the questions that you have or to start posting the questions that you have. All right. Okay, and while we're still waiting for the questions, I also have an announcement to make from the College of Graduate Studies. The college or the university is going to be having a postgraduate visual open day. So there's going to be an open day Wednesday, tomorrow, the 5th of October from 6 p.m. And one of my colleagues will be posting the link. So please look out for that link and join us for the postgraduate virtual open day. The virtual open day is going to be happening tomorrow on the 5th of October. Any questions, anyone? I'm looking at our Q&A here. I don't see any questions yet. And please remember, you can ask a question on any research-related issue that you might be experiencing. Could be something also linked to some of the previous sessions that we've had, either with myself or my other colleagues, and there were still some questions that you're sitting with. This is an opportunity for you to ask those questions. Okay, so while we wait for the questions, or while you think about the questions, okay, so before I move on to what I was going to say, I see there's one question from Anonymous. Can you kindly explain to us how does funding work? I'm not sure whether you're talking about internal Unisa funding or external funding, so funding for master's and doctoral study students. Well, at Unisa, all the master's and doctoral students have the opportunity to apply for a bursary towards their studies. So at the moment, because the university requires that you do a proposal module first, you need to successfully complete your proposal module, after which you will then be applying for the thesis or the dissertation section of your study. And at that point, you are then eligible to apply for funding. So the bursary is open to all the Unisa students, whether you are here domestically in South Africa or internationally as well. And how the funding works is that you're going to need support of your supervisor for you to apply for the funding. And then the university, there is a form that you have to complete, which makes life easier for you. And on that form, there's all the information that you're going to require in terms of how you qualify for this funding and what you need to have in place for you to be able to successfully, to increase your chances of successfully securing the funding. So the funding covers your tuition. It covers your actual research expenses. And if you are interested in attending a conference to go and present your master's or doctoral work at a conference, the university also contributes some money towards the expenses for the conference that you would like to attend. And you can also apply for funding for a laptop as well. And if you're needing a recording instrument, you can also apply for that as well. So basically, the funding that the university offers assist in ensuring that your research journey is as smooth as possible. So your transcription, the transcription money will also be in place. And also, if you need a consultant, for example, if you're doing statistics, then you can also get money for consultant as well. So all of the research related expenses linked to your master's or your doctoral studies are funded by the university. But remember, there is also funding that is available outside of the university that you can apply for. So do not only limit yourself to internal funding that is offered by the university. Because we have so many of you as students, and there is so much in terms of the funding that is available. So to increase your chances of ensuring that you have funding for your studies, also look at external funding as well. For example, the NRF provides funding for master's and doctoral students, and the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences also provides funding for doctoral studies. So these are just some of the funding sources or avenues that you can consider to apply for your studies funding. All right, so I hope that that answers you, Anonymous. Okay. My question is concerning Turnitin. There is so much inconsistency about the acceptable similarity index. Some supervisors advise students not to include the reference list when putting it through Turnitin. Some supervisors say you should include it. What is my advice? Well, That is a very good question. Turnitin is very important because it assists us to be able to detect and determine the similarity. And one of the things that our colleagues from the Turnitin office always say is that we should not only focus on the percentage. So the fact that you have 9% or the fact that you have 30% does not necessarily mean that the person who's got 30% has got some elements of plagiarism in their work. That's not what it means. It just means that the system, the Turnitin software, has picked up a lot of similarities in the work that you've put forward. So what's important is that when you and your supervisor receive the report, you need to study it. You need to look at what it is that has been highlighted. So you might find that in the 30%, when you look at the similarity, all of it is less than 1, right? So less than 1 means that it's not significant in terms of the similarity that are there between what you've put forward and between what already exists. So many people have done research. So when you're talking about research methodology, when you're talking about phenomenology and data collection, the system will pick that up. So these are some of the things that when you look at your report, and that's why it's so important to spend time with your report together with your supervisor, also spending time with your report, because you may find that someone who's got a low similarity index has only 2 or 3 similarities, but then it might be 5% for one, 3% for the other, and 1 and 1. So obviously where there's 5%, you need to zoom in and check what is it. It could be a quotation that maybe you forgot to acknowledge properly, and that is a problem. So the number should not be the sole indicator of issues around similarity. And when it comes to the reference list, the consultants from the Turnitin office have indicated that the reference list has to be included. Yes, the reference list does contribute to the similarity index being higher. And that is why then it's important for you to study the report, to look at the report where you can be able to see and indicate that, no, the reference list, all of the similarities or most of the similarities that have been picked up by the system are actually linked to the reference list. It's not the actual content, and therefore there are no signs of plagiarism. And also, even if there are highlighted sections in the content itself, you go and you give it another look, and then you check, did I acknowledge the source properly? And if you go, and even though you've said Sekgalo 2022, but when I look at the report, there's 1 or 2 or 3 lines that have been highlighted. Even though that whole sentence or those 2 sentences at the end, it says Sekgalo 2022. If there are lines that have been highlighted like that, then it means that is a direct quote. Then it means you used my words word for word. And in that case, you have to acknowledge properly. There has to be quotation marks, and there has to be a page number where you took that work from. Sometimes students misunderstand paraphrasing. Paraphrasing does not mean changing a word here and there, but then the rest of the sentence or the rest of the phrase remains very much the same. So when you do that, then obviously Turnitin is going to pick that up. So you cannot say, no, but I've acknowledged Sekgalo 2022. So why is Turnitin picking it up? So when I look at it, when I study your report, I'll be able to say to you, yes, even though you've acknowledged the source, but the code that you did not acknowledge it properly, right? So that's why it's important for you to study the report. And if you have acknowledged properly, and if there's been highlights, but it's a word or 2 words or 3 words, you'll see that often those words are words that are commonly used. So if you're saying regression analysis, if you're saying interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA, then you'll find that it will highlight that because it's already in the database, it's already in the system. So it will pick it up. And when it picks it up, then it will acknowledge it as a similarity that has been highlighted. Does it appear many times? How many times does it appear? How many people? So when you look at the report, these are some of the things that you'll be able to pick up, and that will assist you to also then be able to justify, to be able to defend, and to be able to say, I've acknowledged all the sources in the right way. So while my similarity index says 28%, the 28% does not mean that I've plagiarized, but 28% means that I've drawn from many sources, and from all these sources, there are words, there are phrases that have been used before. And if you look at my report, if you look at my content, you'll see that I've acknowledged all the parts, the different parts that need acknowledging. Where I've taken from someone, I've acknowledged, and I've acknowledged properly, not just acknowledged, but acknowledged properly. Like I said, if you've taken directly, then you have to include the page number, you have to include the quotation marks as well. If you do not do that, then that is a problem. Then that might be seen as a form of plagiarism. Okay, I hope that helps. All right, how does funding work? We've already spoken to that. Okay. Anonymous, hi. So, good evening, Prof. I'm a fourth-year LLB student, and I'm interested in writing journal articles, but I don't know the procedure. So first thing, then, Anonymous, that I'm going to say to you is that we've actually had sessions focusing on how to write for publication. So the first suggestion that I would make to you is please go back to all the recordings because the links are there. And if you are struggling to access the links, please contact our colleagues at CGS, and they'll be able to assist you with the links for those sessions. So I would direct you to the sessions that we did on writing for publications, because there we actually spent 3 days, 3 sessions, focusing specifically on how to write for publication, because it's very different from writing for your thesis or your dissertation. But just maybe in a nutshell, one of the important things that you need to think about when you are intending to write journal articles is that make sure that you familiarize yourself with the journals in your field. What journals are there in law generally, and what journals are there in law but in that specific area that you are interested in? Maybe you are specializing in commercial law. Maybe you are specializing in cybercrime. Maybe you are specializing in family law. So depending on your specific interest, you would want to look for a journal that will be able to provide an audience for the kind of work that you're writing. So if you are focusing on families, on family law, on issues around child custody, on issues around divorce, look for the journals that speak to that. So go and check. There is an existing list of accredited journal articles, right? They are accredited by the Department of Education and Training. So DHET accredits certain journals. So not all journals are accredited. Some journals are what we call predatory or hijacked journals. And those journals are not accredited, and those journals often would want you to pay for them to publish your work in their journals, right? So even though there are journals that are accredited that still require page fees, it's not all of them, but all actually of the predatory journals would want you to pay. So make sure that you identify a journal, familiarize yourself with that journal. So the journals would have guidelines for authors. So familiarize yourself with those guidelines. Look at what it is that they require in terms of the page number. So you don't want to write an article that is 10,000 words long when the journal that you're looking at only accepts articles that are a maximum of 6,000 words. Already that means your article is likely to be rejected. All right. And another important thing also is again understanding the format of the journal, but also understanding whether the journal is published online only or in print as well. Okay, and then also understand and get to know whether the journal is published twice a year, 3 times a year, or 4 times a year. Right, so because that will also assist you to get an indication of the length, the period that you might wait before your article is published. So if a journal is published 4 times a year, then it means there are issues that come out often in a year, which means your chances of maybe getting published sooner are increased, unlike a journal that's published only once or twice a year, because then it means the competition is very, very tight because there's only a limited number of articles that can be accepted by that journal. All right, and then when writing a journal article, again, in terms of the actual content itself now, the procedure is that you need to have an abstract, a very well formulated abstract that provides your reader with a summary of what they can expect in that article. Remember, when people Google and they're interested in work that has been published around the legal issues pertaining to the family, you want them to pick up your article as well. So in the database or the databases of various journals, there are abstracts. When I Google and I look for literature on a particular topic, what I would get, whether it's a free or a paid journal, is that I will have access to the abstract of that journal, of that article. So what's important is that you have to make sure that your article provides the reader with enough information so that they may want to read the whole article. Have a very catchy, important, straight to the point introductory sentence. Speak about the methodology that you have used in your work. Speak about the process of research, like, you know, drawing from a qualitative research or drawing from a quantitative procedure. A survey or questionnaire was given to 300 people, focusing on 1, 2, and 3. And then based on this, the results show that 1, 2, and 4, right? So what is it that you can tell your reader about your whole article in 200 words? Because most abstracts are 200, at the most 250 or 300 words if a journal is very generous. Okay, so that's what you need to think about. And then, of course, depending on the format of the journal itself, you would think about how you're writing your thesis or your dissertation, but in a very protracted manner. So with your dissertation or a journal or your master's or your PhD, you have a lot of space. You can write for 150, 200, 300 pages. But for your article, remember, it's only about 15 to 20 pages. So how are you going to put the message across in a way that is very clear, in a way that is systematic, but in a way that is very protected, unlike when you go on and on and on in your thesis. This means you're not going to have a literature review in an article that goes on for 7 pages. You cannot do that, right? So your literature has to be about 15, 20 to 30% at the most, because we want to see that you've engaged with what already exists, but then you're also bringing in something, bringing in your voice into the work that already exists. All right, so I think I will pause there and hope that I have answered you in terms of just giving you an idea. But as I said at the beginning of my response, I would really encourage you to get access to the recordings of the sessions that we had on writing for publication, and hopefully that will be able to assist you even further as you are journeying into writing for publication. And all the best with that process. Okay. Okay, let's see what this question is. I wanted to ask as to whether it's possible for some qualifications at an honors level to have a module on research methodology and not have a module whereby we write a full research paper. Anonymous, unfortunately, I'm unable to answer that because many colleges have got different expectations and different structures in terms of what they expect from their students on research methodology. But my understanding is that that module on research methodology includes a research paper, because through writing a research paper, and this is a mini research paper. I know in the College of Human Sciences, which is where I'm from, that it is included, and it's a requirement that a student will write a full research paper. So unlike in your master's or your doctoral studies, this would be something which is more or less an equivalent of a journal article, about 20 pages or 30 pages at the most. So you'll go through the different phases, and through the department, you will be assisted with getting an ethics clearance. Because remember, this is not a full-on research project, but if you're going to be doing research and talking to people, there is some, you need permission from the university to do that, but also so that the people that you're going to be speaking to, or the place that you're going to be going to for your research, need to see the verification that this is indeed from the university and that you have permission to do this kind of work. So my understanding is that for research methodology module, the research paper is not a different module. It's incorporated in that research methodology, whereas with others there is that research writing a research paper, which is linked to that research methodology paper. So one of the aspects of the module is that as you've gone through all the different research methodology aspects, and you've learned about quantitative research, you've learned about qualitative research, all of those different aspects to research methodology, you will then in the next phase then go on to actually put that into practice. And doing that means writing a research paper. So in my discipline, for example, that is what is happening. And my understanding is that this should be the case in other fields as well, or in other disciplines as well, that is incorporated as part of the research methodology, but I'm not exactly sure whether that is the case. All right, so you could be coming from a different discipline or a different college where maybe this is translated differently. But ideally, this is how it should be done because it does help and it prepares students also that when they get to the masters, they already have an idea and are not just jumping into something that they've never done before. It's just that at masters, it's going to be at a larger scale than you would have had at your honors level. Okay. And secondly, the Unisa system does have a tendency with research modules for not availing instructions for upcoming assignments. And if no instructions are given, what is the way forward in obtaining instructions? Well, Unisa is there to assist you to make life easy for you so that when you go to the Unisa, you have updated information, but the information that's on Unisa has been put there, or the input is there from the teaching staff, from your lecturers, from your supervisors. So what I'm saying with this is that if you go to Unisa and there's no information about the assignment that is upcoming, and you have questions pertaining to that assignment, then I would recommend that you contact the relevant lecturers linked to that module directly. So that is how you can obtain instructions. You can write an email, indicate that you tried to check on Unisa, but there weren't any instructions and you are now in the process of working on these assignments and you have these questions, or you just need a direction in terms of how you need to go about doing that assignment, because the instructions are either not there, or if they are, they're not clear for you or to assist you to be able to go ahead with that assignment. So please, the lecturers are there to be at your disposal. The lecturers are there to help you with precisely this question, that even though Unisa is there, the lecturers are also there to assist you to make sure that you understand, because this way it also limits the work on us on the lecturer side when it comes to you submitting assignments that are not in line with what we were expecting. So instead of doing that, when you are unsure, make sure that you contact your relevant lecturers and make sure that you obtain the instructions as needed. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Why is it that most Unisa supervisors do not have time with their students, and how should we handle it? First of all, I am very sorry that some students are experiencing this challenge. This should not be the case, because as supervisors, being there for our students to provide support and to provide guidance is actually an integral part of our work allocation. So as much as I would sit and mark an assignment, I need to do the same way I sit with the student if they're struggling with a chapter, or if they've written a chapter and the chapter is not as it needs to be. It's not only enough to maybe just give feedback, written feedback. Sometimes supervision meetings are also necessary to make sure that we are on the same page. It helps me as the supervisor, but it also helps you as the student, so that you know what's expected, but also so that I know that you understand what's expected, and then we can clarify things wherever there could be any misunderstanding. As supervisors, as lecturers, as professors, there are multiple tasks that we perform, from admin to tuition to supervision. All of these have to be given time and they have to be done. And if I, as a supervisor, have been allocated students, it is expected that I also make time for those students so that they are not delayed in their studies. And that is why in the previous sessions, when we were having this conversation, one of the things that I highlighted was that please try and make sure that there is a contract in place. There's actually sample contracts that are there at the university itself. There's sample contracts, supervisor, supervisee contracts. And if maybe you don't have a contract in place between yourself and your supervisor, maybe just have a conversation with your supervisor about it and say, I heard that we can have a formal contract. Me being assigned to you as your supervisor and you journeying with me as a student for your master's and your PhD, it goes without saying that there is this contract between me and you, and we speak about timelines. We speak about you submitting a draft every 2 months and me giving you feedback after 6 weeks or after 2 months as well. So there has to be that understanding. Some of the challenges happen because of the assumptions that we make. So when there is a contract in place, then you would also get to know, the supervisor will be able to tell you that I'm going to be on long leave. I'm going to be working on a particular project that's going to take my time. So for the month of July and August, I'm not going to be available. So let's make sure that you submit before then, or if you submit just before that time, please know that I'll only be able to give you feedback in September, because July and August I'm going to be away or I'm going to be busy with other things. So that when you submit, you don't have the expectation that I will give you feedback by the end of July or August, because when you have those expectations and you don't get the feedback, obviously that's going to create some tension, and we don't want that tension, right? As I said, when you have challenges or when you don't understand something, the previous question was asking about how do I get instructions on something, and I said contact your lecturer. And the same here with supervision. When you email your supervisor, it is expected that your supervisor should respond to your email in a timely manner, right? So when you write an email to me as the supervisor, I should not stay for a month without responding to your email, because maybe that email is linked to the chapter that you are currently busy with. And me not responding to your email for a month, it means you're not going to make progress on that chapter that you're working on. And that delays the progress in terms of the work that you're doing, that you're busy with. So if possible, have that contract in place, a formal contract in place, where you indicate clearly what expectations you have of each other as the supervisor and the supervisee. Or work on a timeline and say in 2022, January to December, between January and March, this is what I'm going to be working on. And at the end or mid-February, by 15 February, I will submit to you. And then by the end of March, you would give me feedback. While I've submitted, I will be doing this in the meantime while I wait for the feedback, right? Because you're not going to stay doing nothing for the whole month waiting for feedback. So what is it that you will do or can do in the meantime while you wait for feedback from me as your supervisor? So have that timeline where you have each and every month accounted for, all right? So that will assist you. And then between you and your supervisor, you agree whether it's feasible, what's on the timeline, and whether the timeline is realistic or not. And then you have that as a basis in terms of what you're expecting from each other. And then if you have a contract in place, you've set the timeline, and you're still experiencing challenges with your supervisor, or at the moment, you're having challenges with your supervisor where the supervisor does not have time for you, is not making supervision meetings or not responding to your emails, there are procedures in place, right? So read your master's and doctoral procedures and get information and guidelines on how to respond to such challenges. Read your master's and doctoral procedures because they are there to support you as a student, to serve as a guide for you as a student to know how the process works. So the journey from when you register until you graduate, what happens in between, during the examination process, how long do you wait? So all these different expectations that the university has of you and that you can have of the university are there in the procedures. So if you are having challenges with your supervisor and you've tried reaching out, you've tried having a conversation and the supervisor does not seem to have time for you, then you have the chair of the department. That's the person that you can write to. Please understand that there are different levels in terms of seniority, but also different levels in terms of the proper processes to follow. So while you might be frustrated and want to write directly to the principal or write directly to the dean, what will happen is that it's going to waste your time somewhat, because the dean would refer it back to the department and say, I received this, please look into it, what's going on? Because the dean needs information to be able to make an informed decision, but to also be able to respond to you. So that process will actually waste your time. So instead, you can write to the chair of the department, someone closer to the supervisor within the department. The department also has higher degrees committee. Okay, so if you know who the colleagues in the higher degrees committee of the department are, contact that committee and then speak to them about the challenges that you're having. If you go to your departmental website, I'm sure that information would be there under all the different support that is there for you as a student, or queries that you might have relating to master's and doctoral issues, undergrad issues, assignment issues. There are different people that you can contact. Contact those people first in the department, contact the chair of the department, and if you don't get any joy in the department, only then can you escalate it maybe to the dean and beyond. Okay, so but try as much as possible to speak to a supervisor, but of course we understand that sometimes along the way relationships do break. It's quite unfortunate because it does waste time. It does waste your time as a student, because if it gets to a point where there is irreconcilable differences and you are appointed a new supervisor, that might extend your time, because now as your new supervisor, I need to start from the beginning to get to know your study, your work, what you've done so far, to read your work. So that's going to take a bit of time. So if it's possible to mend things and to get things to work with your supervisor, go that route as much as possible. Only consider requesting a new supervisor and all of that if you have exhausted sorting things out with your supervisor. But as I said at the beginning of my answer, as supervisors, it is our responsibility to have and make time for you as our students. And if we're not making that time, then it means we're not performing our duty. And if there are issues or challenges, we need to be able to communicate that with you. Hence, I said that if you know that I'm going to be away for 2 months, then you know that if you send me something, I may not be able to respond to you immediately. And that's not going to frustrate you, because you would know that I had indicated to you my unavailability as your supervisor. Okay, so that's how you go about with that. Okay, Good evening, Prof. What are the main points to look out for when drafting an abstract? Okay, the main points to look out for is firstly the opening sentence, the introduction. So you need to have an opening sentence that captures your reader. So your abstract will have about 5 to 6 or 5 to 7 sentences that will make up the 150 to about 250 words that are required, whether you are writing the abstract for your dissertation, your thesis, or the abstract for the article. So you start with that opening statement. So okay, I would need to think of an example that I could give. So for the question that came out earlier from the student from LLB who was asking about writing for publication. So let's say that person is interested in writing an article about challenges faced by parents fighting for custody, something like that, right? It's not a good example because I just thought of it, but I want to give you an example so that you can think about how to practically apply that or to think about that. So you can say something like, there's been an increase in the cases around battles on child custody, or there's been an increase around disputes related to child custody issues. So that's how you open it. So when you say that to me, I'm immediately thinking, oh, okay, there's been an increase. What's going on? In what way? And why? Why has there been an increase? So there's a lot of disagreements between people. What's going on? So you open up with a sentence that's going to leave me as your reader wanting to know more, being interested to hear more, right? So you start with an opening section like that, right? And then you can follow that up maybe with something like, there's been a lot of work that's been done focusing on this, but most of the work that's been done has not focused on, I don't know, same-sex couples. Maybe that's what you're interested in. So your research is going to zoom in on that. So now that same-sex couples can get married, can adopt children, can raise children, what happens when they divorce, right? Do they also experience disputes around custody issues? Is it more complex in this case because maybe there was a donor involved, and who was the one carrying the baby, and who was the one only supporting? And in that case, then who has more rights? What does the law say? And things like that, right? So while there's been a lot of research that's been done on disputes around child custody, not a lot has been done focusing on same-sex couples. Already, I can see that you're bringing something into the conversation, you're bringing something into the existing literature on issues around child custody and the law, right? So that's what you're saying. And then you're saying, I conducted a study focusing on same-sex couples, So that's your third sentence. Or you can say, using a qualitative study, or drawing from a qualitative approach or using a qualitative study, I did this and that and that. So immediately there you're bringing in the methodology, right? Drawing from a qualitative study, I interviewed 20 couples, or I studied records of the cases that have been brought forward and what the outcomes were and all of that. So you're saying this is what you did, right? And then you go on to say the results indicate that this and that and that and that, right? Based on this, a number of recommendations can be made around how we can rethink blah, 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 blah. All right. So already those are 5 sentences that I've given you. And that's your abstract, right? So when I read that abstract, I already know how you conducted your research. I already have a glimpse of what your research found. You also don't want to give everything away. If you give everything away, why would I want to read your work, right? So I want to then read to see how you got to these findings that you're telling me about. And then you're already saying, these are some of the things that we can think about around this issue. So you open with a statement, and you provide a follow-up statement based on that statement, and then you speak about what it is that you did, how you did it, with whom, so the kind of data that you did, and then how you analyzed and what you found, and then you go on to then say, this is what this suggests. I offer 6 recommendations. I offer 3 recommendations highlighting this and that and the other. I point to what. I suggest based on the study that we should start rethinking what. So that's what you do. That's what you say. So that's how, those are the main points when drafting an abstract, right? You have your introduction, you give that opening statement, and then you need to speak about your methodology. What is it that you did? And then there you have your 2 or 3 sentences, and then you also have the conclusion as well. Okay, so that's how you would then work on an abstract. Okay. I'm struggling to access the Unisa research repository for past research papers. Kindly outline the library access process. Easiest answer to you, contact your subject librarian. Each and every discipline in each and every college has got a dedicated subject librarian. If you have not been in conversation with your subject librarian, I would worry, well, depending on where you are in terms of the level of your study. If you're still at proposal level, then okay. But that is the easiest answer that I can give you, because that's going to assist you very directly, because it's someone who is working with your field, your discipline, and they will be able to redirect you properly, and they'll even be able to assist you in terms of some of the research papers that you might be looking for. If you don't know who the person is, find out who your subject librarian is, contact the library, ask them, tell them that I'm in the Department of, or the College of Accounting Sciences. This is my interest. And I've been trying to get access to the repository and I'm struggling. Can you please assist me? They'll be able to do that. You can either contact the library directly, or you can ask your supervisor. Your supervisor will definitely know who the subject librarian is. They can assist you with the contact details of that person. Okay, so do that, and that should provide you with some relief and you getting access to all the research papers that you need. All right. Good afternoon, Prof. How do I access doctoral research proposals in the Unisa library? As far as I know, the research proposals are not put in any repository in the library. So what I often do with my students is that I, with the permission of my previous students, I give my students successful proposals of my previous students. And I have found that assists greatly, because sometimes even just giving feedback and providing some guidance on how the student can approach the work, there is always something to be said about you seeing it and seeing a sample of what you are busy doing should look like. So it gives you an idea of how you can then do your own work. You can check with your supervisor whether they do have access to research proposals that they are able to share with you, or whether they can check with their previous students, whether they can share their proposals with you. So with the supervisor, or check whether in the department they do keep their proposals maybe in a database somewhere, and whether that can be accessible to the students. For a long time, the proposal module did not go through the kind of review process that we have now. So the supervisor and a colleague in the department, so it was an internal process within the department. But then with time, obviously, and with feedback and evaluation and reviews, now there is a formal review process that happens around research proposals. So then it means that the department does have access to research proposals, but because it's other people's work, there is some permission, I would imagine, that would be required for them to share this work, the previous proposals, with you as the student. As far as I know, the Unisa library does not have access to these research proposals because they're not submitted to the library to be kept in the repository the same way as the actual thesis and dissertations are. Okay, so please speak to your supervisor and check if maybe they can be able to assist you with that. And of course, be proactive as well. If you know other former students or students who are a bit further in their studies, who are busy now with their thesis or dissertation, then it means they completed a proposal that was accepted, that was found to be good, to the point that they were allowed to continue with their master's or dissertation. Then I would encourage you to maybe get in contact with those students and ask if they would be willing to share some of their proposals with you. Okay, and this is where, again, peer support comes in, that as you are a student, a graduate student, you are not alone. So reaching out to other students and other students, helping other students is also another way of ensuring that we create an environment of peer support. So do that, or contact your department, contact your supervisor. Hopefully you'll be able to get access to some research proposals. I'm sure it won't be difficult to. And I'm sure maybe some of my colleagues do, I'm not sure, but I know that with my students, I do share research proposals of previous students, as I said, with their permission. And I do see the difference. I do see the difference when they've had access to another proposal and use that and have that assist them to work on their own proposals as well. Okay. Okay. Can you please kindly provide us with an overview of the research process? Okay. All right. In your response, cover the following: research proposal approval by the supervisor, ethical review committee, editing for the dissertation, and submission to the university. Apparently, it takes 12 months for the dissertation to be marked. Okay. Firstly, it does not take 12 months for the dissertation to be marked. Okay, so the research proposal approval. So as you know, the first thing that you do after registration is that you start with the proposal module, what we call the proposal module. So you work on your proposal together with your supervisor. And depending on how quick you are, how the process goes, what are some of the challenges you experience along the way, this can take a couple of months to close to a year. So the due date for the proposal has been October, right? But I've just learned for this year, there's been an extension to November for the finalization and submission of the proposal. Okay, so this means you have about, so if depending if you've registered in February or March, so let's say you have between 6 and 9 months to work on your proposal, and you need to pass your proposal so that you can be able to move on to the next phase, which is your dissertation or your thesis. And if you do not succeed in your proposal, it's not automatic that you would be given another opportunity the following year to work on your proposal again. So your supervisor has to give approval with motivation as to why you could not complete your proposal in the current year, why you should be given another opportunity to work on your proposal for the second year. Okay, so, and we know there are many reasons, and life happens, family life, personal things, there's a lot of things that happen, but obviously the university then has the right to look at the motivation and then determine based on that motivation whether to allow you to register again or not. But often when the supervisor has approved, because the supervisor knows you, knows the process, has been part of the journey. So if the supervisor says, please give the student another opportunity, more often than not, the student would be given the opportunity. Okay, so you work on your proposal for these couple of months, and when you are done with your proposal, you then submit your proposal. There's a link that is provided for you as the student. When you're done with your proposal, before you submit it, so the supervisor has to be happy with the proposal, before you submit it for review by the Higher Degrees Committee and all the other review members, you have to subject your work to turn it in. So you work on your proposal, you complete your proposal. When you and the supervisor are happy with the proposal, then you submit it to turn it in. And then depending on what the outcome of turn it in is, you work on that report, you do what needs to be done. And then when you are both satisfied, only then do you submit your proposal to the Higher Degrees Committee of your department, right? On the link that would have been provided for you, together with the Turn-It-In report. So that's going to take about 3 to 6 weeks. So colleagues would be appointed to review your proposal, and then feedback would then be given to you to say this proposal is acceptable, so it can be passed, everything is good, or this proposal has got good elements to it. It can be passed pending the student doing revisions as indicated by the reviewers, because they would highlight things that require attention. And then they would say, if the supervisor is happy with the revision that the student has made, then we are happy for the proposal to be passed. Then that's option 2. And then option 3 is that no, this proposal is not up to standard. We're not happy with it. There are too many issues. There's a lot of revisions that are required. And as a result, the student should give attention to this proposal again and make the necessary changes, do all the work that's required. And because there's so much work that needs to be done, we would like to see it again so that we can see whether the proposal is now up to standard or not. So that's the third possible outcome. So those are the 3 outcomes that you would get after submitting your proposal, right? And then when you are now at a point where your proposal is accepted, then only then can you submit your proposal to the Ethics Review Committee. So you cannot do the process concurrently, because what you submit to the Ethical Review Committee has to be an accepted proposal. So when you've given the go-ahead, then you work on the review forms. There's quite a lengthy form that you have to work on. And please make sure that when you're working on your ethical review, you don't just copy and paste. Yes, most of the questions that are on the review form for ethics are linked to what's in your proposal itself. But because you're also going to provide the proposal, don't just cut and paste. Look at what they're asking you and provide what they're asking, right? So when they say a brief background of your study, the objectives of your study, all of that. So the objectives would be the same as what's in the proposal, because you're not going to change your objectives for the ethics review, right? So there are certain things that you would provide as they are, but there are certain things that you want to write in a way that the ethics committee can read and immediately understand what your work is about. Okay, so then you complete all those forms. You have your interview protocol, you have your survey questions if you're doing a survey. So whatever that it is that you're going to have to use to collect your data, you include there. And if you're going to be sending out posters to people to get people to be part of your study, you also include that draft poster as well, so that the ethics committee can look at the wording and that everything is in order. Obviously, all these things you would have worked on with the support of your supervisor. So when you submit to the ethics committee, it's things that your supervisor would have seen and your supervisor would have given the thumbs up. Okay, so that's what you then do. You work on your ethics documents and then you submit to the ethical committee. So again, the higher degrees committee in the department, whoever it is that is the contact person for this in your specific discipline, then you submit for that. All right. So it goes to the ethics committee and then it will come back with their comments. Either they're happy or they want you to do the corrections. You do the corrections and then they give you a thumbs up. And after they've given you a thumbs up, only then can you start thinking about collecting your data. Okay. Please do not, under any circumstance, start collecting your data before you get ethical clearance. Do not do that. Okay, so when you have your ethics clearance, then you start collecting your data. You working with your supervisor, you start submitting chapters, back and forth, feedback, happy with chapter 1, happy with chapter 2, 3, you go on, and then you're done, you have your draft thesis or dissertation. Okay, and the recommendation also is that when you complete a chapter, subject that chapter also to turn it in. Remember, when you've started registering to turn it in, you are allocated to a class. So you are in a particular classroom. And that classroom is the one that you're going to be in until you complete your study. Okay, so when you submit something, and when you submit it again, the system remembers. So these are some of the things, again, that you need to take into consideration. So, okay, you work on your chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When you're done, together with your supervisor, you go through the work again, your supervisor reads the whole thing again, and when you're both happy, then you send the work out for editing. Okay, so again, some departments have got a list of editors that they approve, that they've worked with, whose work they are happy with in terms of the standard and quality of the editing services that they provide. So don't just look for someone on Google and they say, I'll edit for you for 1,200 Rand. For a thesis that is 250 pages and a person says they'll charge you only a few thousand rands, then you should be worried, because it takes a lot of work and effort to edit work and edit it properly. Remember, when you are done and you have this document that is now only electronic, we are going to Google and access that. Is going to be in the repository, and you will not have the opportunity again to change anything in it. So that's what people are going to see for years and years and years to come. So you need to be happy with the product that you have at the end. Okay, so make sure that your work is properly edited, but also you want your work to be properly edited because you don't want the examiners picking up on grammar and editorial things. Those are minor things that should not be taking the time of the examiner. And some examiners really frown upon work that has got grammatical errors and editorial issues and not formatted properly, because they believe that those are easy things that you can sort out. So it means that you were clumsy with your work and you end up losing marks unnecessarily. For those of you who are doing your masters, that can be the difference between you getting a 70% and getting a 75%, which is a distinction. So an examiner can decide that, you know, if this work, the content is fine, you know, it's good, and the arguments, everything is in place, this is good work. But because the person did not take the time to make sure that things are done systematically, formatted well, grammatically in place, I cannot give it a distinction. So you don't want commas and full stops and exclamation marks to be the reason why you don't get a distinction, please. So do take editing seriously. Okay. And then when you're done with the editing, then the work can be submitted for examination. All right. So you know that you need to submit intention to submit, and then the work and then the examiners are appointed. And then the draft of your work, the completed draft of your work, the final thesis, dissertation, is then submitted to the university, and then the university then sends the work to the appointed examiners. For your master's, you have 2 examiners. For your PhD, you have 3 examiners. Okay, so examiners are given 6 weeks to 3 months to look at your work, to read your work. So they're given this time because it's understood that for somebody to read a 200-page document, they need time, because we don't want the work to be rushed. But we also understand that these are also academics who also have other commitments as well. So hence they're given this time for them to do the work and give the feedback to the university. All right, so if you submit your work, let's say now in November, ideally by February, March, you should have received your feedback, right? So you're looking at about maybe that 3 months, it comes back. So the way that it works is that you and the supervisor are not part of the examination process, right? You are not part of the examination process. There's a committee, there's offices that deal with the examination. So the examiner then brings back the feedback with the report saying whether you pass or fail and how, and corrections, all right? So that comes back, let's say, after the 3 months. So you submit in November, and then the feedback comes back in February, March next year, all right? And when the feedback comes back, it can either come as a 1.1, which means you're such an amazing student, everything is perfect, you've just passed, there isn't anything that you need to correct, maybe just a few things here and there, but otherwise everything is in order, right? That rarely happens, but it is possible, that's why it's there. Or you can get a 1.2, which is what most of the students would get. So a 1.2 saying that the work is good, is acceptable, it's of academic standard, it meets all the requirements, good work, but there's still some minor things to correct. So maybe, as I said earlier, those editing things, grammatical things, and also maybe revising or rewording certain things. So some suggestions that the examiner might have that can only further enrich your work. So the examiner can come then with the feedback that will also be useful if you also want to publish your work, right? So it will come back with that feedback, and then the 1.2 means you have to do corrections to the satisfaction of your supervisor. Okay, so with the 1.1, because there's nothing to be done, then it goes through to the next level where it gets approved by the Dean's office, and then from there it goes to the College of Graduate Studies for all the other admin things to be done. And you need to understand all the committees don't sit every day or every week, so maybe they sit every other week. So they might have been results received in mid-March, like I said, and then it gets finalized in the department. And then from there, it goes to the dean. So that's already maybe another 2 weeks to a month, right? With the committee sitting, and then it goes to the graduate studies office, where things also get finalized, get approved by the vice principal. So that takes, about 5 to 6 months. That's why I'm saying when you submit in November, you can expect to graduate maybe in the spring, which means between our graduations are between March and June, right? So depending on when your results come out, the corrections are done, you can still graduate in June. But if the process takes longer for whatever reason, then you might graduate the March to June is the autumn graduation. And if you don't make it for that, then you can graduate in the spring graduation in September. And I think maybe this is where this 12 months comes in. It's not the 12 months for the dissertation to be marked. It could be 12 months between submission for exam until maybe you graduate. That can happen, but ideally it should not. It takes shorter. So yes, so you get a 1.2 where it says corrections to the satisfaction of the supervisor. So you're given an opportunity to work on revisions, and you're given a month to do this. So if you got your results in March and you're given a month, so you have until maybe mid-April or end April, count months. So that's how the time accumulates. Okay, so you do that revision for a month, and then you submit, everything is fine. Within a month or so, everything is sorted. Then you can graduate in June. If you get a 1.3, then a 1.3 means there's a lot of revision that needs to be done. And because of the extensiveness of this revision, the examiner does not believe that it's the kind of revision that can be done in a month or 2 or 3. So what a 1.3 is then called is a revise and resubmit. So you are given an extra year as a student to revise based on all the revisions that you've been given. You're given another year to do this. And then when you're done, then you resubmit. When you resubmit, it goes again for examination because of the extensiveness of the revisions that were required. Okay, and then there's also a 1.4. A 1.4 means you have failed. That's what it means. All right, so that's how the process works, right? Sometimes, please understand, we appoint examiners, and examiners are given timeframes. You are told that Prof. Sekgalo would like you to examine this dissertation or thesis for us. The student has submitted. Please do this work and return it to us within this period, right? And I say, okay, yes, fine, I'll do that. Unfortunately, sometimes examiners do not submit the reports at the time that was given to them because of various reasons that they can or would give. And as a result, sometimes the marks only come back after 5 or 6 months, right? That already, plus the 2 months when you submitted and the process was done and given to the examiner, that already gives you 8 months or so. And then there's revisions to be done, and then you get to graduation. So that's how it can get to a year. I'm explaining this so elaborate, in such an elaborate way, because I would like you to understand how the process works. And because it involves so many offices and so many committees and so many stakeholders, if I can call them that, it becomes difficult for it to be as controlled as we would like it to be. Because if an examiner, after 5 months, they still have not given us the feedback, again, like I said earlier with the other comment, we can give it to another examiner, but that means starting again from scratch. We need to give that person again that period. So now we have to just follow up with this person and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, in some instances, and it has happened. The examiner then comes back and says, unfortunately, due to life circumstances and whatever, I thought I'd be able to do this, but I can't. At that time, 3-4 months have passed, so we have to start from scratch. So that's how this happens, and that's why sometimes it can take so long for you to get your feedback. I know we've all been students, and we know the anxiety and what it takes for you to keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. We do get it. We understand. And I think from the university side, they try as much as possible to expedite the process. But as I say, relying on multiple stakeholders makes it difficult sometimes. It's not an excuse, it's a reality, but it's something that we are aware of, that we're conscious of, and because we continue looking for ways to make the process much quicker and easier for you as the student. Okay, I hope that helps. Okay, how do you go about interpreting your data analysis, your data? So analyzing your data. How do you go about interpreting your data analysis? Okay, so you conduct your study, you get your data, you go, you interview people, you give them questionnaires, you collect the data, whichever way that you do, and then you sit with this data, right? And then you have to make meaning of the data. Remember, when you get to a methodology section and you're working on collecting the data and engaging with the data, you should always remember your objective or objectives. And you should always remember your research questions. That's why it's important that when you put together questions for your survey, you have to make sure that those questions are in line with your overall research question. They're in line with your objectives, because if those questions are not, or your interview questions are not, then the answers that you're going to get from your participants are not going to assist you to answer the question that you have. Okay, so when you get your data, you need to sit with the data, read the data, look at the data, and say, what is it that I think it's not as straightforward when you're doing qualitative research, unlike when you're doing quantitative research, because you do your statistical analysis depending on what instrument you're using and how you're choosing to analyze your data. And then from there, you can then be able to see your variables, how they're interacting, and whether the conclusions or the findings that you get are significant or not, and what does that then tell you about the relationships, the causation, and factors, and how things are affecting one another. So it becomes somewhat easier, but you need to be able to know and understand how to do a statistical analysis for you to be able to read your data and to make meaning of that data. Okay. Whereas in qualitative research, you sit with a lot of text, and you have to decide, what is it that I'm looking at? What is it that's jumping up at me? What is it that I'm hearing when I'm looking at this data? So some people use the software that assists them to be able to get themes. Right, so you would use, for example, your Atlas TI. So, but even though it does that, it assists you to make life easier for you, unlike you doing and finding things by hand, you as the researcher still need to make meaning of that work. So what was my research question? What is it that I was looking at? You need to go back to that and say, so what is it that the participants are saying here? What am I hearing? There's 20 participants. How many of them are saying this? So what is the underlying thread that I'm seeing, that I'm hearing? What narratives are coming across? And then you start noting those, right? So, and again, here it's going to depend on what your form of analysis is, right? So the question is a bit broad. So it makes it a bit difficult for me to respond to it specifically. But depending on whether you're doing thematic analysis, you're doing content analysis, you're doing discourse analysis, that will then be what you use to be able to determine what it is that you're looking for in the data, right? What discourses are there? How are people using languages? What things are coming up for you as you're engaging with this data? And you note those down for each and every participant. And then you bring those together and say, what themes am I getting here? Is it 3 of them? Is it 5 of them? Is it 7 of them? Are some of them linked? Are they not linked? And then when you've done that, you then invite, if I can put it like that, your theory into the findings, right? So let's say you were using I use things that are close to the work that I do because it'll be easier. Let's say you were using a feminist theory, right? And you're looking at that example that we were talking about earlier around child custody and who's got the rights and who doesn't, right? So you're going to say, using a feminist lens, what is it that I'm hearing here? What is it that I'm hearing in terms of who is then given the rights? Who is then being privileged in terms of how people are experiencing getting access or being favored when it comes to issues around child custody and disputes around that. So where is the justice? Who is being privileged? So the way in which you're going to start to make meaning of the data that you have would also be determined by the theory. So your theoretical framework back there, chapter 2, chapter 3, comes in here as well. So you don't leave it there. You said you'll be using this theory, drawing from this theory and using it as a lens to assist you to understand and engage with the ways in which child custody happens and who's always had the rights and now who needs to have rights and how are things equal or not, where are the justices and injustices, how is the law applied in terms of ensuring equality and all of that. So all of these things are around what feminism also speaks about. So when you interpret your work, then you bring in the theory in engaging with this. But it's also an opportunity to say, this theory fails or it comes short when it comes to assisting to make meaning of 1, 2, and 3. Because the theory speaks about this and that, and what the data reveals shows that we need a rethinking in terms of how we approach things from a feminist perspective. Okay, and doing this and interpreting and providing such analysis is now your way of bringing in your voice in the work, is your way of saying, actually, this theory is insufficient. So we actually need to think of other ways in which we can look at something like this. And therefore, I suggest that we consider 1, 2, and 3. So this is now how you bring contribution into the field. You bring theoretical contribution, you bring theory to the literature, but you bring an understanding into this phenomena that you've been investigating in the work that you've been doing. All right. Okay. What should you emphasize? You emphasize what the participants also emphasize. So you don't bring in your voice when you're dealing with the findings, but you emphasize what the participants have said. You emphasize what the data reveals. And then based on what the data reveals, only then can you bring your own voice and your interpretation on what the data is revealing to you. Okay. All right. Okay. Remember, when you're doing, explain the tenses that should be used when moving from proposal to chapter of the thing. So in the proposal, this is something that you're proposing. This is something that you intend to do. This is something that you want to do, you're hoping to do. So you are suggesting to us that I would like to do this and that. I would like to explore. I would like to investigate. I would like to look at how this and that, and then I'll be doing this. right? So when you are now writing your thesis and dissertation, you are reporting on what you've done, right? So in this study, I sought to explore, right, challenges that people face when it comes to child disputes and parental rights, right? So this is what you sought to explore. You're telling us this is what you had intended to do. And based on this, this is what you did. You went and you interviewed so many people, you did this, you got so many people, and then this is what the study reveals. So in terms of the tenses, in your proposal, you are using the present or future tense. So the intent for something in the future, you hope to do this, you want to do this, you plan to do this, so it's the future tense that you're using, right? And then in your thesis, the actual work, you are reporting on what's done, that's there, and now you're reporting it to us. So you're using the past tense. So it's going to be a combination of the past and the present tense, where you're also saying you are suggesting. So you won't say I've suggested. I'm suggesting that going forward, when you look at these issues, we should consider 1, 2, and 3. So depending on which chapter, so now maybe when you're working on your discussion conclusion chapter, this is where now again you are moving us into the future. So you use the present and the future tense. But from the previous chapters, you are using the past tense because you are reporting on what you've done. All right, I hope that helps. Okay, time is moving faster than I thought. Okay, I submitted my final research proposal end of August, and I'm still waiting for feedback to know whether it's accepted or not. September. And now it's beginning of October. Okay, Severina, it's still early. It's still early. So it's only been a month, right? So you submitted end of August. So that gives us the whole of September. And now it's the beginning of August. So now we're moving into the 5th week. So, and remember when I was talking about the different stages of what happens when you start from your proposal all the way to your thesis, I said when the proposal is done, is submitted to the reviewers for them to work on it and then give you feedback. That takes about 3 to 6 weeks. So you are still within that period of 3 to 6 weeks. If by the end of August, you still have not received feedback, then worry. And if by that time you have not received feedback, then you can follow up. You can follow up by writing to your supervisor, who will then write to the relevant committee members and ask what the progress is and when you can expect feedback, okay? But for now, it's still early. So just relax and maybe continue with your literature review and start writing up stuff while you wait, or actually start working on the things that are required for the ethics process. But it's still early, so don't worry just yet. Okay. Yeah, what do you advise me to do while waiting? Yes, continue reading, work on your literature review, because that is not dependent on all these processes. Even the ethics process is not, the literature review chapter is not dependent on that. So continue working on that. And if for your proposal, you maybe start working on your interview schedule and all the things that are going to be required. If you're going to use a poster, if questionnaires, so things that are going to be required for the ethics committee, start working on that now, okay? And also the literature review as well, so that you don't just sit around and wait, okay? How do you approach your literature review for your doctoral studies? How do you develop your theoretical framework? How do you put your argument in a cohesive and logical manner? Hey, Nkosana. Okay, lots of questions. Okay, so literature obviously is going to assist you to know what question to ask ultimately. You have an idea of what you want to do research on. You have this curiosity, you have this question in your mind, but that question might change or might need reframing after you've done your literature. because you might ask a question that's already been asked. For you to know whether the question that you're asking has not been asked, or whether it has been asked, but you want to ask it in a different way, you need to know what already exists. So how do you approach your literature review? You need to think about what your idea is, what your topic is, and start working on possible keywords that are instrumental for the work that you want to do, right? You are interested using the same example. I'll use it for all the questions in the LLB. So you're interested in issues around same-sex couples. So same-sex couples and marriage, same-sex couples and child dispute or child custody. So you are interested in that particular topic. So you look at that and then you think of various keywords that you can use that can assist you to be able to get to relevant literature. You don't just want to do literature review. You also want relevant work that's going to assist you to be able to think about the question that you're asking. Remember, there's been research done for years and years and years and years. So decades and centuries, research has been done. So chances are someone somewhere has thought about something similar. They've done work on a similar topic. They might have done it differently. They might have done it in a different context. So there are different ways in which you can approach your work because of where it's based, right? So has it been done in South Africa? Has it been done in Ghana? Has it been done in Tanzania? Where are you based? How are you going to approach this? So your literature review, you need to approach it with all these questions in mind, all right? And think about 5 keywords maybe that I want to look at literature that attends to these things. So that is a good starting point for you to already start searching for relevant literature. If you just go broad, you will type on Google Scholar and you'll get 3,250 results. So how do you work with that, right? How do you work with that? So you need to start by saying first, what are the specific things that I'm interested in? And these things will assist you to be able to look at the possible literature that you can then focus on, right? So not everything that you're going to read, even when you've looked and gotten the literature, is going to go into a literature review. You'll get access to a number of texts and work, and after reading, you might realize that, okay, no, maybe not this one, right? The literature that you want to put in your literature review has to represent the best examples in terms of the work that's done, the best examples that you can find on the point that you want to make, right? And you need to be able, as I said, with the keywords and the headings that you might want to use, you need to vary the level of detail you include in each section of the literature review, right? And how relevant it is to your own work. Just because it's talking about same-sex couples, it's not necessarily going to be linked to the work that you're doing, right? And like I said, a solid literature review will assist you to have the right question to ask for your study, right? And when you immerse yourself in the literature, then already by the time you're doing your own work, you're somewhat of an expert, if you will. That's why I always say, as a student, you should consider writing an article just based on the literature review that you did, because that takes a lot of work. So you can do a paper based on critical review of the work that you've done. Okay, so don't have too many keywords, don't have 20 keywords, because you will now overwhelm yourself, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself. Again, don't have too few, right? Because again, when you have too few, you might miss some important work, some classic work. And with the literature review, make sure that you try and limit dated sources. Try and have recent work as much as possible. Because if you look at old literature, you might find that the work that you're looking at was actually built upon by other people over the years, but you miss recent work because you're looking at older work. Only go to older work if you're looking at what we call the classics. If you're looking at maybe a particular theory and you're looking at where that theory started, who started that theory maybe in 1920. So then you can go to that classical text and then look at how it developed over time. And that's how you then work and develop your theoretical framework also, if you will. So again, your theoretical framework will be dependent on the kind of question that you ask. What work are you interested in focusing on, right? So, and what theory? So you need to read. And again, when you read the literature that's linked to your work, then already at that moment, at that point, you are at the same time already getting in touch with the theories that are used. Because when you read literature, you read work that's done by other people, but at the same time, you also see what theoretical lenses, what theoretical frameworks they used. And then based on that, you say, which one would be relevant for me? Maybe none of those would be relevant for you. What other theory can you draw on for your work? And develop a framework from there where you explain what this theory is, what it's about, but most importantly, why is it relevant for what you are asking? How is it going to offer you a lens to be able to analyze and engage with the data and the work that you're building? Okay. Putting your argument in a cohesive and logical manner. There again, it's important that each and every paragraph that you have has got one main statement, a thesis that you put forward. And then from there, you provide supporting statements of that thesis. All right, so you do that by providing relevant literature. You do that by providing your own voice, bringing in your own voice to engage with what the literature is saying. So what you want to do is that you don't want to have too many arguments in one sentence. So in this in one paragraph. So in this paragraph, this is the main idea. This is what this. I need to look at a paragraph and say, okay, in this paragraph, this is what you're discussing. That's the one thing that you're discussing. And then you go on to elaborate and engage and discuss that. And then that paragraph will then lead to the next paragraph, which will then bring another idea or continue with that idea, but building on it. Okay, so that way, then we have a golden thread that combines one sentence from to each other, but also combines one paragraph to another. So think of this also with the headings as well. So you have a heading that all the paragraphs under that heading have to be linked and speak to that heading. Okay, and then each and every paragraph under that heading also has to speak to a particular idea, a particular idea, a particular idea, but all these ideas are connected to each other, and all these ideas are connected to the heading. That way, then you have a cohesive and logical discussion, a logical narrative. That you start with something saying, this is what this is about. This is why it's about this. It's about this because when we look at it this way and that way, we realize that 1, 2, and 3. And because of 1, 2, and 3, that's why we are here. And then you move to the next one. We are here, however, we should not just stop here. It's important to think about where we are so that we can be able to move forward. But by moving forward, it means we need to do 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So you see from where I started, everything each and every sentence has to link to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Okay, so, and that's how you build a cohesive and logical argument. You're not going to bring 5 things in one paragraph. That is very confusing. You say one thing, and then after the full stop, you bring in a new idea. So there's no flow there, and that's not what you want. Okay. Okay. May you please advise me on the criteria to consider when creating a topic at honors level? When you choose a topic, you need to choose something that fascinates you, something that interests you, something that you're passionate about, something that keeps you awake at night, if you will. So what is it that you're interested in? What is it? Are you walking in the streets and you're seeing people living in the streets and that bothers you, and you want to understand what is it that can be done to assist or help people? Why do people end up living in the streets? What are the issues? So every time when you're driving around or you're walking in the street, you find that this is a question that's nagging you. Maybe that's something to consider as a topic for your project, right? Because not all of us, when we pass by, we are nagged by that, we consider, we think about that, which means there is something there that fascinates you, that interests you, that irks you even, right? So when thinking about a topic, think about something that does that, something that you're curious about. Think about something that you might want to change. So if you are someone who's fascinated with technology, you use your phone and you're thinking, oh, but if only this phone could do this and that, if only this phone could do this and that. And maybe then your passion is there, right? Either the hardware or the software. So something around technology. So think about things that interest you, things that catch your attention, that you think about. And when you find something like that, then maybe that's something that you can consider focusing on, right? When you go home and there's no clean water, and you're thinking about what is it that can be done to make sure that we have water purification systems that actually assist our communities. That's something also to think about that you can consider. So depending again on in which field you're in, are you in law, are you in economics, are you in politics, where are you? And think about that in terms of thinking about the topic that you can consider. There's so many topics. And I hope this will assist you in terms of thinking about how you can zoom in on something and actually do research on that. When you do research on something that you're actually passionate about, that you're interested in, then it brings you so much joy. It brings you so much joy, and you actually enjoy the process of that research. Okay. After submitting a research proposal, I realized we're running out of time. And I think what I will do, because we have another session on Thursday, so please, I would encourage you to attend that as well. If I don't get to answer your question today, I'll take note of the questions that I didn't get to when we run out of time, and then I will start with those questions on Thursday, but it will only make more sense to me to do that if you are here as well and you ask the question. So if I don't get to your question, you know yourself, if I don't get to your question, please come back on Thursday and then I will be able to answer your question. While these are meant to assist everybody, I think it will also be important that if you ask the question, that you actually hear your question being answered. Okay, but thank you so much for your questions. Okay, so where were we? All right. After submitting a research proposal and having received feedback on it, is it that I may now proceed to further my research assignment, or should I wait for further instructions from the supervisor module coordinator? Okay. I'm not sure whether you're speaking about your honors or your masters. Okay, so as far as I know, we don't have research proposals. at undergraduate honors, unless if you're speaking about the research paper as part of the research methodology. But after you've received feedback, depending on what the feedback is, if the feedback is good and they're happy with your proposal, then that means you may go ahead with your research. But obviously you go ahead with your research in consultation, in conversation with your supervisor. So have a conversation with your supervisor and say, okay, now that I've received feedback and everything is fine with my proposal, how do I then move on to the next phase? So have that conversation with your supervisor. And if you are busy with your honors, yes, speak to your module coordinator, because sometimes there might not be a specific supervisor, unless if maybe the lecturers in that module, but it would be a good idea to speak to the module coordinator to say, okay, I've received this feedback, everything is in order, what is the next step? Then they'll be able to assist you with that, so that you don't continue on your own only to find that you're doing the wrong thing. Okay, so I'd suggest that you do that. Hi, Zanele. Okay, yes, Zanele. May you please help with guidelines on how to write a good hypothesis and conclusion? Thank you for this session. Okay. Again, just like a research question, a good hypothesis will be based on the literature review that you've done. A good hypothesis would be, because you're not going to make a hypothesis that is just from nowhere, a hypothesis that is unfounded. So for you to come up with a hypothesis, just like coming up with a research question, you need to have done your homework. You need to have read to say that, okay, if I make this claim, if I make this hypothesis, because you want to make a hypothesis and then go and do the study, so that hopefully at the end of that study, you can accept the hypothesis. Of course, you can reject the hypothesis. The results will determine which way you go. But writing a good hypothesis, again, is dependent on how much homework you've done before you formulate a hypothesis. You don't just decide, right? That unemployment, when people are unemployed, they will live in poverty. Yes, maybe that might be true. Is it true? Maybe others have looked at it and they have found, and where, right? In South Africa, globally, where? So where? What are you talking about? What lens are you using? What criteria are you using to make that hypothesis? So you make that hypothesis after having read and deciding that, wow, actually, I think there is merit in one arguing that unemployment, there is a correlation that unemployment leads to high levels of poverty, right? And then you go and you do the study, and then you can be able to say, yeah, indeed, based on what I found, unemployment does lead to high levels of poverty, right? It's a simplistic example, but when you're thinking about putting together or formulating a hypothesis, you need to do so again after having read and getting an understanding of whether that is a statement to make, or that is a claim that you want to make, and then go on to try and prove it for us. Okay, and then a conclusion. Writing a good conclusion. When you write your conclusion, again, you think back, you look back, you say, where did I start? All right, where did I start? What questions did I ask? What were my objectives? So with the conclusion, you're going to tell us whether you've reached your you've answered your question or not. Right? You've proven your hypothesis or not. And in the conclusion, you're going to say, okay, in the study, this is what I aimed to do. This is what I wanted to do. I was interested in 1, 2, and 4. My objectives were this and that and that. And then based on the findings, based on the work, we can see that these are the issues, these are the challenges, And then based on this, this is what I would like to put forward. So the conclusion gives you the opportunity then to offer recommendations, to speak to us about possible future research, things that we can ask and think about when going forward into the future with this particular issue or this particular question that we have, right? So the conclusion is about saying, this is all I've done, and this is what I want you, the reader, to take with you at the end of it all. This is where I leave things. With this conclusion, I'm suggesting that this issue should be understood in this way, should be taken forward in this way. These are the things that need to be put in place for us to be able to make meaning, for us to be able to move forward, for us to be able to see a change in this particular phenomena that I've spoken about. Right? I have shown you that unemployment leads to high levels of poverty. And as a result of poverty, there seems to be some correlation with high levels of crime. Because if we look at other places where the levels of poverty are low, you find that crime is not as high. So could there be a correlation? So I've done the study where I looked at all these different variables and found that indeed there are these connections. Therefore, for us to reduce the level of poverty and for us to maybe make sure that the statistics on crime go down, we need to give attention to the issue of employment, creating employment, empowering people, encouraging entrepreneurship. What are the recommendations that you have based on what you found? And these are the things that you will provide for us in your conclusion chapter. Okay, all right. I think with that, I will not stop here, but I will pause here and apologize in advance to those of you whose questions I could not answer today. But I am going to note these questions down, and then when we come together again on Thursday, I will start by responding to these questions before we continue with more questions. And of course, for those of you who already asked questions, you are more than welcome to ask more questions. And maybe based on today, there will be more questions based on some of the things that I've explained to you today. And we have that opportunity to continue this conversation on Thursday. And I look forward to engaging with you then. Have a good night, everyone. See you on Thursday.
Wow, Prof.
Hey, Bronwyn.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Ceci?
I'm good. You had 21 in total.
Yeah, hey. Amazing.
I'm quite
Amazing.
happy.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Dinelle earlier,
Yes.
and because I was asking her whether students do ask questions, what happens, because I had prepared a little something in case they don't ask. There's something I can speak to them about. Yeah,
To trigger the questions.
yes, but luckily that was not even necessary. I mean, we even ran out of time.
I'm
So
impressed.
so that was, yeah, I'm also impressed. That
And
was good. Ceci, I can't seem to copy these questions. How do I get them?
can't you do a screenshot?
I did a screenshot, but then it doesn't, when I put it on my Word document, sure, it doesn't. I wanna hide, like, let me try again. I wanna hide. Otherwise, I'll take pictures of the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very, yeah, it comes very faint.
Because I'm not sure.
It comes,
When you screenshot me,
yeah, let me
I think
see. Let me see if I
already
can.
if you say you need to take pictures
Yeah, no, I can see the
using
questions,
your
but they become blurry when I extend, like when I zoom, they become blurry.
No,
So
let me
just take pictures. I think that's going to be the easiest.
Okay, perfect.
Otherwise, re tlo ikopisa ditlhogo. trying to figure this
I
out.
wonder if there's a, I hope we'll just see if I wonder, just curious for after the session, do they stay there? Are you able to respond? But just take the picture in case you are not able to respond after the session.
Yeah.
That's what we should do for now.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
No, it's fine. Actually, no, it's not bad. Actually, it's only 2 questions that.
Yeah, it's only 2.
Yeah, it's only 2 questions that I didn't get to answer.
2.
All right. No, that's fine.
No, it's fine. We'll see you on today's Tuesday, Thursday, ne?
On Thursday, yeah, this Thursday.
Yeah. We'll meet again on Thursday.
Okay.
Hey, this load shedding is a challenge, eh?
Yo, I'm telling you. Yeah.
Because Dineo has load shedding, Lena, and she was not aware, so her battery
No, it changed while we were connecting just before 6. Actually, at 6 o'clock. I think 2 minutes before 6. Then we got a message saying it's pushed to stage 4. So she was not supposed to have load shedding.
Stage 4, yes.
When they pushed it to stage 4 at 6 o'clock, exactly on the dot, then she says, with stage 4, it means I'm starting load shedding now. Because they don't even say, no, we'll start later. They start immediately. So that's what happened to Hashim.
Linda, I joined late because I took it for granted. Well, I knew for this load shedding until 6 o'clock, but then I forgot to charge my battery.
I see.
So for the first half an hour, Linda, I was out.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, I also had load shedding scheduled until 6, but it actually came back like 10 minutes before, which was quite, but we had already told the students we'll start at 10 past, so we just waited for 10 past. Yeah.
I know it's something that we have to deal with. It's okay.
Ooh, I'm telling you, hey, sure.
We just have to accept and be prepared.
Yeah, true.
Okay. No, that's fine.
All right,
have a good evening.
Okay, you too. All right,
bye.